Divorce lawyers. What are some memorable cases you've encountered? Had a client whose soon-to-be ex-husband used her email address and phone number to sign her up for every bank, loan, religious, mental illness, and pornographic site he could think of. She was bombarded by people contacting her about her interest in their products/services. He even put out ads for sex partners on Craigslist with her information. The kicker is that she actually went out with the guy who contacted her. If I learned anything being a divorce attorney I no longer practice, it was that if the opposing party sounded like a nutcase, I would soon see the nutcase come out of my own client. Normal people don't just accidentally marry crazies. Not often.
Wow, that's really something. I guess some exes can really cross the line. It's wild how far someone might go in a messy breakup. The fact that she went out with someone who contacted her from those ads just adds another layer to the story. I'd say it's a reminder to keep an eye on who you're letting into your life. Crazy situations just seem to bring out the craziest in people sometimes.
Had a husband and wife go toe-to-toe over an ashtray they got in Vegas at some point. Neither smoked, strangely enough. Spent nearly $5,000 for me and another attorney to duke it out in court over the silly thing. Prior to proceeding, I explained what the cost would be for to argue over something silly like this, and that he could give me $2,500 and I would fly to Vegas for the weekend and get him an identical one instead. He said he didn't care about the cost because he intended to smash it on the courthouse steps in front of her if we won. We won, and he followed through with the smashing. He laughed and said the look on her face was worth much more than $2,500. People get crazy in divorce proceedings.
Divorce can bring out some wild behavior. I once knew a couple that fought over a random item, and it escalated quickly. They spent so much money and effort on something no one really cared about. In the end, the husband smashed it just to see his ex-wife's reaction. It was a strange kind of victory. Just goes to show how emotions can take over in these situations.
I worked for a law firm while in college, and we had a client who had just come home from a 2-week vacation with his wife, only to be served with divorce papers and a temporary restraining order as soon as they pulled in the driveway. Wife didn't say a word and just went into their house. Poor guy came straight to our office and was massively confused, to say the least.
That must have been a rough situation for the guy. Imagine coming back from a vacation, expecting to unwind, and then getting hit with something like that. It's crazy how life can change so quickly. I remember a friend going through a tough breakup too, but at least it didn't happen in such a dramatic way. It's hard to process those kinds of surprises.
Husband and wife, still living together at the time, had a small confrontation. The husband pulls a sphincter, says what? On her, and she takes the bait and says what? He giggled like a little kid. She then told her lawyer, who had to talk to his lawyer. His lawyer asked him if he called his wife a sphincter and told him he's not allowed to call her that anymore.
That's a pretty funny situation. Just shows how a small joke can escalate. It's like he thought it was harmless, but it turned into a real thing. Must have been awkward to explain that to the lawyer. Sometimes, it's the lighthearted moments that end up being memorable, even if they don't go as planned. Lots of humor can come from those little conflicts, just hopefully not involving lawyers again.
My brother is a divorce attorney. His most memorable case, he was representing a guy in a divorce custody battle who was accused of horrific child abuse. Very graphic, very detailed depositions from the young kids against daddy. Things look grim. Then my brother, a failed actor, notices the deposition transcript, done by social workers under oath. Contains a question at the end from one of the kids, "Did I hit my marks?" He wonders how little kids know about acting jargon. Subpoenas wife's personal checking ACCT during discovery. Sure enough, acting lessons. Deposes an extremely sketchy acting coach, and panicked coach produces DVDs of practice interrogations with the kids, hours of coaching the kids on exactly what imaginary things to say about daddy. He says it was his one and only Perry Mason moment in 20-plus years of practice, and Dad got sole custody of the kids.
That's a wild story. It's crazy how unexpected details can turn a case around. Your brother really had to piece everything together like a puzzle. Those acting lessons made a huge difference, showing how some people will go to lengths to manipulate the truth. It's cool he had that moment where everything clicked for him. Must have been a tough situation to navigate, but glad it worked out for the dad in the end.
My first client was in an abusive relationship. Her soon-to-be ex told her she wasn't going to get a dime in support. Would text her terrible things about how he would never pay. Ended up getting her a sizable support order for her and her children. I remember the last thing I talked to her about was that she was so happy she finally took control of her life. A few days later, I got a call from opposing counsel asking if I would consent to terminate the support order. I asked, why would I do that? Turns out she passed away in her sleep the day prior. Heart issues that she suffered from for years. Postscript, opposing counsel, a relatively young guy, also passed away soon after. I think I might be the only survivor from that case. Also had a client who fought tooth and nail over cookie sheets. Perspective, I suppose. Edit, some corrections.
That story is heavy. It shows how life can change suddenly, especially in tough situations. It's wild how people can be going through so much, and then things just take a turn. The cookie sheet thing adds a strange twist. Life's full of contrasts, I guess. Just goes to show we never really know what someone is dealing with behind the scenes.
My aunt has been divorced for quite some time. She drives her attorney crazy with her requests/demands. Most recently, she took her husband to court over 1. He switched the beneficiary of his life insurance policy from her, the ex-wife, to their children. 2. She wants court-ordered drug tests weekly. She found out from her friend who works at a pharmacy that he has had quite a few narcotic prescriptions, but obviously can't enter that into evidence, or friend will be fired. 3. Wants to know the days he's working and locations, so she can have her private investigator keep an eye out and make sure the new girlfriend isn't joining him at hotels he's charging on his work card. At some point, she just needs to let it go and move on. She got the house and the house payments, the kids, the boat, and the Marriott points. He doesn't pay alimony or child support, so it seems like it worked out well.
It's kind of wild how some people just can't move on. My aunt's been in this loop for ages, making life hard for her ex. She's really digging into his life, and it just seems unnecessary. I mean, she got a good deal with the house and the kids. At this point, it feels like she needs to focus on her own life instead of holding on to the past.
Not a lawyer, but as a courthouse clerk, I had a court order come across my desk that explicitly banned a father from playing Minecraft with his son over the internet because the ex-wife alleged that the in-game chat was a form of improper contact that wasn't outlined in their custody/visitation plan.
That's kind of wild. It's interesting how relationships can get so strained that even something like a video game can become a point of contention. I can't imagine being in that situation, where a father is restricted from connecting with his kid over something so common today. You think they'd focus on better communication instead of banning games?
My mom works in divorce court. She comes home with stories that are interesting, sad, funny, and sometimes just weird. It's what you would expect for the most part. Then there are the drug addicts that don't want to give up custody. The day of the drug test comes, and the person miraculously decided to shave their entire body. Tests are now given right after the judge asks for one. And some are hilarious when you are not the one involved. My favorite is, a voicemail is played in court as evidence. The wife is cheating on the guy. This voicemail is from the husband to the wife. Hey, I know you were there. The only reason you can't answer is because I know you can't speak with that guy's dick in your mouth. Sometimes my mom has those stories which are funny if you're not involved.
That sounds like a wild job. Your mom must have seen some crazy stuff. I mean, people really get desperate when it comes to custody. Shaving their whole body for a drug test is something else. And that voicemail? That's one way to make a point in court. It's funny how something so messy can lead to such outrageous moments. Just goes to show how intense those situations can get.
I'm a real estate lawyer, but a friend of a friend is a divorce lawyer. I was once told a story where said lawyer was brutally attacked by a client's former spouse. Apparently, the former spouse blamed the divorce attorney for taking him to the cleaners in the divorce. The worst part is that the lawyer was at the grocery store doing his weekly food shopping with his wife and kids when he was savagely beaten. Criminal lawyers work with the worst people on their best behavior. Family lawyers work with the best people on their worst behavior. Edit. Thank you, kind stranger, for my first Reddit gold. You the real MVP.
It's wild how life can be. This divorce lawyer was just doing his thing, shopping for groceries with his family, when he got attacked by a guy who couldn't handle the outcome of his divorce. Just shows how emotions can spill over in the worst ways. It's a reminder that family law can put you in tough spots, even when you're just helping people. Makes you think about the risks some professions carry.
I work for a mortgage company, and occasionally we have to review divorce decrees if someone is divorcing to remove a spouse's name from the loan. There is a notorious case known around my pretty large department as the Cat Divorce Decree account. In this divorce decree, there is a 5-page addendum specifically regarding Mittens and Buttons Johnson, names changed for their protection. Memorable clauses included mandatory 10-minute Skype sessions weekly, no unsupervised play dates with children under 15, and that their claws be trimmed every 3 days.
That's a wild situation. It's interesting how people can get so serious about their pets. I guess for some, those animals are like family. The clauses sound pretty detailed, and it's funny to think about the lengths people will go to ensure their pets are taken care of. Makes you wonder what other unusual things people argue about in divorces. Life really can be strange sometimes.
Not divorce-related, but still interesting. When a local couple died, there will indicated that their house and sizable fortune would remain in trust, managed by family friends, until their several cats died of natural causes. The odd thing is, it's been over 20 years now, and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color.
That's a pretty strange story. It's wild to think about a couple planning like that. I wonder if the friends managing the trust are just feeding the cats some sort of magic diet to keep them around. Changing color is just another odd twist. Makes you wonder what's happening behind the scenes or if the cats are actually some sort of secret.
When I was an assistant DA, I was involved with a PFA, protection from abuse, proceeding for a divorcing couple. The allegation was that the husband sent his brother a Facebook message that said, "Somebody's about to get Ray riced." Looks pretty bad, right? Well, both the husband and the brother get on the stand and explain that they were talking about their mother. They said that ever since they were kids, when their mom would yell at them, they would say shit like, "Mom, you're about to get rock-bottomed," or "You keep it up and you're going to get a stone-cold stunner." Mind you, these guys were, at the time of this hearing, in their late 20s. It was all I could do to keep from laughing. I was just picturing the kids from Talladega Nights the whole time.
This is an interesting story. It's funny how people can take things out of context. The seriousness of a situation can change quickly based on explanation. It sounds like these brothers had a unique way of dealing with their moms yelling. I get that they were just joking around, even if it didn't come across that way. Makes you think about how humor can pop up in the oddest places.
Divorce lawyer here. I've never had anything too crazy. The worst I can think of is representing my client who had to be transported from the jail for, allegedly, violating the restraining order between the two. There was another one that was technically a dissolution of domestic partnership, not a divorce, but essentially the same thing for never married parties. That was fairly crazy. Client alleged her ex had killed a man and reported it to the police, but I guess they never found the body. Also, alleged his attorney was sleeping with him. One of my coworkers had a case where the ex was awarded the couple's dog in the divorce only to have it euthanized just so the other would suffer more. I don't care how bad your relationship is, there is no excuse for that. That pissed me off to hear about.
It's wild how messy relationships can get. That case with the dog is just rough. People can let their emotions lead them to some dark places. It's hard to imagine someone would go that far just to hurt their ex. And the story about the client alleging murder? That's a whole different level of chaos. Divorce can bring out the worst in people, for sure.
The child, a 10-year-old girl, of my father-client thanked me after the custody battle against the out-of-control alcoholic mother. The court awarded full physical and legal custody to the father. The child said to me that I was a lawyer for kids. I never forgot the compliment. That was 30 years ago.
That's a solid memory. It's nice when you realize your work impacts lives, especially in tough situations like that. Kids have a way of cutting through all the adult nonsense and saying what matters. Being called a lawyer for kids must have felt rewarding. It's good to know you made a difference that stuck with you over the years. Simple moments like that mean a lot.
Here's a not divorced one, but it's pretty good. Husband and wife are from a culture where you simply do not divorce. They have a few kids. He moves on and dates a woman for nearly 20 years, and they also have a kid together. He does a will and tells no one how it is set up other than there is a trust. The guy dies. He made a trust for his entire estate. He designated that his kids would each be beneficiaries with equal percent interest, but also gave his girlfriend 1% more than his wife. She was also named as executor of the estate and trustee for the trust. Popcorn was had.
This story highlights how complicated relationships can get, especially when money is involved. It's wild to think about how the husband thought this through but kept it all a secret. That last twist, giving the girlfriend a bit more, probably stirred up so many emotions. The way trust and family can clash in situations like this makes for some serious drama. Must have made for some tense family discussions.
My father did divorce law for many years. We were in Virginia Beach for a tournament I was in with a friend of mine and his father. This is back around 07. My dad got a call from a forensic accountant he hired to track down some accounts his client knew her husband stashed money in. He was asked to pull over and to put him on speaker because he would not believe what he was about to tell him. The accountant traced all of his money to 3 bank accounts totaling over $300 million in another country. My friend's father screamed. My father dropped his phone, and there were numerous WTF from the back seat. My father's client made out with 2 of the 3 accounts, and they walked away silently. He was paid in full, given a small bonus, and has never heard from her again.
That's a wild story. I can imagine the shock in the car when that accountant dropped that info. Finding out about that kind of money must have changed everything for your dad's client. And the aftermath, just walking away quietly after a big win like that, is pretty interesting. It's funny how life can take such unexpected turns, especially in the world of divorce law.
Not a divorce lawyer, but a child of divorce. Happened when I was about 6 or 7. I'm 18 now. I learned this about a year ago. My mother often likes to talk about how my father didn't offer any financial assistance during the divorce, and his involvement was purely selfish. And a common thing she's told me is that he's never paid for my schooling, which is true post-divorce. However, what I learned was that during the divorce, he offered to pay for half of all of my school fees. She instead chose child support, which he has paid for every year. She also took all of their combined savings out and into my 6 years old at the time bank account, which my father had no access to. This meant when showing bank statements, my father had more money than my mother. I've lost some respect for her since then.
It's interesting how perspectives can shift over time. Learning about your parents' choices can change how you see them. Your mom's actions seem questionable now that you have the full story. It's tough when those we look up to reveal a different side. Sometimes, understanding the complexities of adult relationships can alter our view on family dynamics. It's a lot to process, especially at your age.
Not a lawyer, but I have a funny story from a wine storage place. Guy rents out a storage spot in this wine storage center, temperature controlled. What's odd is he rents out this huge space and slowly, over the next several months, begins filling it with cases of very expensive, hard-to-obtain wine. Owner of storage place asks if he is moving, downsizing, or why he needs so much space. Guy tells him he's swapping wine out of his cellar and replacing it with cheap wine. He was planning on filing for divorce. Wife knew about basement collection, but had no idea what was in it or how much it cost. He knew she was going to be vindictive, cheating, and would want the wine. He was happy to give it all away.
That's kind of wild. I get it though. People go to extremes when they think things are going south. It's a smart move, really. Hide the expensive stuff before the split. It's probably better than fighting over who gets the wine in court. Just shows how people think ahead when they see trouble coming. Can't blame him for trying to protect his collection from a nasty situation.
I'm not a lawyer, but was in a painful divorce. I had my ex stand up before the judge and say, also, there is this item on his credit card from Strip Joint, and I had to look it up, and I think it's a strip club. Since we were representing ourselves, I got the judge's attention, and he let me speak. My response: Your Honor, she knows what the item is about because she was there that night and even got a lap dance from another lady. There were quiet a few chuckles from the peanut gallery, and the judge had this quiet, hidden little grin that vanished quickly. It felt awesome to say because I'd been fucked over so much from the divorce. It was shitty.
That sounds like a rough situation. It's wild how these moments in court can turn into unexpected comedy. Bringing up the lap dance must have caught everyone off guard, especially the judge. It's interesting how a painful experience can lead to a surprising moment of levity. Sometimes, being honest in a tough spot can feel freeing. Glad you found a way to express yourself, even if the circumstances were tough.
I gotta say, reading these makes me happy that my parents were so civil during their divorce. My dad got the kids most of the time because he could better afford to take care of us. Mom pretty much got half of the house's worth and some of Dad's retirement fund. Both walked away and are still able to be around each other without fighting. So I call that a win.
That's a solid situation. A lot of people have messy divorces, so it's cool to hear that your parents handled it in a mature way. It must have made things easier for you and your siblings growing up. Having both parents around without drama is definitely a win. It just shows that even tough times can end on a good note if the adults act right.
I saw a mother and father live together and fight over the location of the Xbox and Wii. The games were in the family living room. The father took the games from the living room and put them in his bedroom. The children then spent all the time in the father's bedroom. The mother literally went to court to obtain an order that the Xbox and Wii be returned to the living room. They spent thousands on this.
It's interesting how something like a gaming console can cause so much conflict. It seems like a small thing, but when the family dynamic gets involved, it becomes a bigger deal. The kids probably just want to be around both parents. It's wild to think about the money spent just to fight over where some games should be. Sometimes, it's the little things that reveal deeper issues.
My father-in-law was an attorney. He represented a husband in a divorce, and the discussion about division of assets was so petty it included fighting over partially used boxes of grocery items. When the couple refused to compromise over a half-eaten box of cereal, the judge lost it and said he was going to make a summary judgment and exclude the couple because they were wasting the court's time.
That's a pretty wild story. It's funny how people can get so caught up in the small stuff during a divorce. I can't imagine fighting over a half-eaten cereal box. Sometimes you just wish folks would see the bigger picture instead of getting into the details. It's good to remember what truly matters in the end.
My uncle, a doctor, knew his marriage was close to ending and explained to his soon-to-be ex that after a discussion with his parents, he was now financially successful. He would repay them their out-of-pocket costs for his medical school, etc., which in the 80s they had fully cash paid, no aid or scholarships. Well over $100K, which they then held until after the divorce and gave back to him as a safety deposit box of cash checks.
That's an interesting situation. It sounds like your uncle was trying to find a way to handle the divorce with some sense of fairness. Paying back his parents shows a level of responsibility, even if it came at a tough time. The way they held on to the money until after the divorce is a bit unconventional, but I guess it was their way of supporting him. Family dynamics can be complicated.
Back when I was in law school, I was a clerk for a judge that heard a lot of divorce cases. The craziest one involved a gambling addict. The guy would write ridiculous checks to the local casino, $20,000, $30,000, even $100,000 plus, all the time. The wife admitted to going with him to the casino each time, but said she only played the penny slots and had no idea he was spending that much money. Because they were splitting the remaining assets that were still substantial. She wanted the money he spent at the casino to count against him, so she would get a whole lot more. While there were copies of the checks, it was his word against hers as to whether she knew about them and whether she was also playing the high-stakes games. The husband said she knew, and she played the high-stakes games too. I remember the oral hearing was the last week that I worked there, so I never heard how it turned out. I do, however, remember the judge thinking they were both lying, which all good judges always believe.
That sounds like quite the situation in law school. Gambling can really complicate things, especially in relationships. It's interesting how both sides had their stories, but the judge seemed to see through it. It's a reminder of how messy divorce cases can get when money and trust are involved. Don't think I would want to be in their shoes, having to deal with that stress.
The number one thing was not any one client or in single trial. It was the simple truth that, out of all of the couples that I helped get divorced, there were only two where the real question was not who on earth, though, that these two getting together was a good idea. Seriously, I had scores and scores of clients in marriages that clearly made no sense whatsoever. One where the guy seriously went from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, so she was wise to get out, and only one where the question was, why the hell don't they just work through this? The lesson: get an outside perspective from some smart people who are one, detached, and two, totally honest. My sincere belief, based on doing divorces, is that for most of the vast majority of marriages that wind up in the shitter, the writing is up in the sky in letters 1,000 feet high way before the couple sends out the invitations.
It's interesting how clear things can look when you're not involved. I've seen friends struggle in relationships that seemed doomed from the start. The advice I gave was usually to talk to someone outside the situation. Sometimes, a fresh perspective can reveal the truth that people in love might miss. It's a reminder that being too close can cloud your judgment, and sometimes it's obvious what needs to happen.
I'm reading all these stories about parents trying to keep the other parent out of their kids' lives for all kinds of crazy reasons, and I just wish my soon-to-be ex-husband wanted to be with our son. Nothing hurts worse than having your 5-year-old ask when he'll get to see daddy again. How do you even explain that?
It's tough when kids get caught in the middle of adult issues. I had a friend who faced a similar situation. Her ex just dropped off the radar, and their kid kept asking about him. It hurt to see her try to hold it together while dealing with that confusion. Kids shouldn't have to worry about these things. It's just a really hard spot for everyone involved.
Husband inherits about 2 years' salary from a relative and puts the money in an investment account. Husband and wife live off of their incomes for the next decade, but any major purchase is bought with a check drawn off the inheritance account. Nice furniture, a car, electronics, etc. When they divorced, he got everything because his inheritance had never come in lead with the marital assets. So all the major purchases were his free and clear, and they divided the junk. Diabolical.
That story is a classic example of financial strategy in relationships. It's interesting how money dynamics can shape the course of a marriage and its ending. Keeping inheritance separate can really change things when it comes to division of assets. It's a reminder that being smart with finances can have significant consequences down the line. Sometimes what seems like a small decision can have a big impact later.
Child of divorce. My father was pissed that he had to pay 50% of college tuition for both my brother and myself, and took my mother and stepfather to court about it. The judge looked at both sides' financial information and determined that rather than my father paying for half, he could actually afford to pay more than 50%. 82% to be exact. Really screwed himself over on that one.
That's a tough situation. It must have been a lot to deal with, seeing your dad put himself in a worse position. It's crazy how things can turn out in court. I guess some people underestimate their obligations and the judge's ruling can surprise them. It sounds like your dad didn't see that coming at all. Just goes to show, sometimes being stubborn can backfire.
Not an attorney, but worked for a major financial institution that had to review documents for mortgages. Had a divorce decree, spend 30 pages detailing who had custody of their 2 dogs, which had to be used, what food. It was ridiculous, detailed the next several years for who had custody on what holiday, and how the dogs had to be transported. If you could think of the ridiculous requirements, it was in there.
That sounds pretty wild. I mean, putting that much detail into a divorce decree for pets is next level. It's funny to think about how seriously some people take their pets in these situations. A lot of folks probably wouldn't even consider that level of planning. Reminds me of a friend who fights over who gets to pick the dog's name in their breakup. But this takes it further.
Not a divorce lawyer, but my uncle's divorce. I'll spare you the details, but it was messy. It comes time to split up all the stuff, and she comes to court with an itemized list of everything he owns and how much it's worth. It came out to something stupidly high like $50 million. But some of the highlights from the list were shovel $100, flower pot X $50-75 each, big pins X $1,005 each, stupid shit all of it. There were like 3 or 4 legitimate items on the list, and the rest were anything and everything she could think of that he had, and then jacked the prices and amount of each up and wrote it down. My uncle brought in a shovel, that one pissed him on in particular, to the next court date and gave it to her saying, she can take her damn shovel, it sucks anyway.
Sounds like your uncle's divorce was a real circus. That list is wild though. I can't believe she tried to price out every little thing like that. Bringing the actual shovel to court was a bold move. I guess he wanted to make a point about how ridiculous the whole situation was. It's crazy how people can get so wrapped up in the details during a breakup. I can't imagine dealing with all that.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.